Our last speaker this evening is one of our founders, and somebody that, well, it's official. I've known you for 50 freaking years. Wouldn't have known you otherwise, even though we were in law school together. There would have been no way I would have known you. Hell, you started 2 years before I did. You started 2 years before I did, even though we finished at the same time. But there's no way I would have gotten to know you but for this. And, wow. Am I getting emotional? That doesn't happen. One of the founding members of our group turned me from a former football player into somebody that loved the game and played the game with pure passion and love. That's what Tim Tarzan taught all of us that have ever played here at the University of Oklahoma.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Tarzan Wilson. Everyone calls me Tarzan. And I am your ancestor. All of this is a consequence of an idea I had. Truth be known, it was an idea whose time has come, and other people would have had it, and it might have happened. But this is a consequence of an idea I have had. So, in some sense, if it were not for me, everybody in this room would be home on the couch or in prison. I'm from a little town in western Oklahoma, a farming town called Cordell. I was a gridiron player in high school and banged away at being a gridiron player in college. When I graduated from college, I went into the Marine Corps and fought in Vietnam as a lieutenant of Marines. I was shot twice. The war profoundly affected me. I can remember being on the plane when I left that country thinking, man, you're wrapped way too tight to be with regular people. I needed a place to decompress. What better place than school? Go to class 8 or 10 hours a week, ride your bicycle, there's pretty girls. What's to dislike? I had seen rugby for my first time when I was in the Marine Corps. I'd been stationed in Quantico, Virginia, and myself and a couple mates of mine were going up to D.C. to do some drinking in the Irish bars up on M Street. We were crossing a big open field across the street from the White House called the Ellipse. You may have heard of the Ellipse in modern life. That's where Trump gave his speech and the folks left from there to go to the Capitol. But this day it was used for a rugby tournament. I subsequently found out it was the Cherry Blossom Tournament. Washington, especially the government quarter, has a lot of cherry blossom trees. In the spring, they bloom out just in a gorgeous way. Blooming cherry blossom trees lined the Ellipse. The Ellipse itself was a verdant green as we walked up on the match. And it was two teams playing fiercely, the wind blowing through their hair. They were really into it. It was New York Old Blue and Atlanta Old White. New York Old Blue had a deep, dark kick, dark blue that was almost black. And I suppose you can guess the color of Atlanta Old White's kid. This contrast between black and white with the cherry blossoms framing the action. I looked around and there was a big Falstaff looking character, you know, from the Shakespeare plays, Falstaff, big ruddy beard. He was standing there in the sidelines and he was drinking wine out of a bota, you know, the Spanish leather wine sack. And there was pretty girls, and I can remember the first thought I had. And I've had that same thought every single day, up to and including this day, and hopefully tomorrow. And it was, I have got to do this. After I got out of the Marines and before I came to law school, there was an intervening time and I got to play a few matches for the Fort Smith Rugby Club, so I played a handful of matches. I knew that OU did not have a rugby club, and it was my determined intention to found one when I get here. So that was, I came here to found a rugby club. I had to go to law school too, but I came here to found a rugby club. Law school takes up in the fall a couple weeks, 2 or 3 weeks earlier than regular person school. It was in this intervening period of time that law school had a football practice for the intramural football team. They called themselves the Legal Eagles. I'd been a gridiron player, and I thought, what the heck? I'll go out and, give it a go and maybe get a good run in. And that's where I met the great John Woods. I don't use that word accidentally. All of us, if we're worth our salt, want to be honest and brave and compassionate and empathetic and silly, all at the same time. Few of us ever accomplish it, but my friend John Woods did. He was a true gentleman, scholar, athlete, and you are well served to have him as one of your founders. Turns out that John had been a military brat, had grown up in Spain and northern Virginia, had gone to undergraduate school at Dartmouth where he played rugby, and he was a second-year law student at OU, and he too had a hankering to start a rugby club. And right there, we started the rugby club. We needed 2 things. We needed a faculty advisor, and we needed troops. John had gone to undergraduate school at Dartmouth, and I'd been in the Marines, so we didn't know any undergraduate professors. We knew some law school professors, and we approached one as a team, and the guy readily agreed to be our faculty advisor. But he said, I play basketball at lunch over at the field house with this crazy guy from the English department who may have played rugby. So I was all over it and found the guy's office was in Ginger Hall, and he had office hours, and I staked him out, and I pounded on his door, and within 2 minutes, Al Veely and I found out that we were both former Marine officers and rugby players, and he's been my best friend ever since that. Been for 50 years. Al is a brilliant man. He's written more books than Hemingway and Davy Crockett combined. Through the dint of his own hard work, a skinny kid from New York became one of the world's leading experts on Native American literature and had lectured on Shakespeare at Oxford. So Al readily agreed to be our faculty advisor and said, I want to play. Al had played rugby as an undergraduate at Harvard, and in graduate school he had gone to Stanford, where he played for a club side called the Peninsula Ramblers, which, according to Al, was ex-cons and drug dealers and various people like that, esteemed rugby members, and Al wanted to play, and he was 34 at the time. Seems so old. Al was a very effective rugby player. He played scrum half. Scrum half is a position that, by its very nature, the nuances of the game, it requires someone intelligent to play it well, and Al's smart as hell. He had a very effective ball. He was a good tackler, good sure tackler. But the most important characteristic I remember as Al Veely as a rugby player is he was a tough son of a bitch. He could take a licking and keep on ticking. When he played rugby, he was way more like a Marine than he was like a college professor. So now we had a faculty advisor. What we needed was troops. John and I assumed without knowing that because there was 400 men in the law school, that some of them must have played rugby as undergraduates or me like me as under a different circumstance. We were quickly disabused of that knowledge when we had tried to have our first practice. Again, it was before regular person school started. Put a notice up in the law school, and there were 4 of us at the first practice. We had it over at the pitch right next to the John Woods Rugby Clubhouse. We had already picked that pitch as our pitch. I'd had my Brigham Young moment where I said, "This is the place." It was an obvious place for a rugby pitch, and right in the middle of the campus. So there was 4 of us. It was John and I, a fellow whose name has been lost to history, who was a good dude, played a little prop for us the first season, and then returned to the natural order of things. The 4th person was a Norman High School graduate who had wrestled at Norman High and gone straight into the Marine Corps. Had served in Vietnam as a Marine Sergeant and been wounded 3 times. Robert Franklin Waters, who became Bob the Block. I know that this is not about the Marine Corps, but I would like to modestly intone that of the first 5 OU Rugby players, 3 of us were Marines. So John and I recognized that, okay, we were going to have to recruit from the undergraduate school, and we were going to have to be a teaching rugby club. We didn't care. We were just about building a rugby club and making it happen. So we were going to be a teaching rugby club. So when regular person school started on a Monday, I went over to the student paper and hunted up the editor of the student newspaper. And I took a picture of one of my teammates that I played with in Fort Smith, and he was getting just hammered on the sidelines. And his golden hair was like in a halo, and a headband that he fancied. He fancied those little white elastic headbands. It was in the air, the ball was in the air. His arms were all askew, and his legs. And he was getting really shit hammered. I can remember pausing and thinking before I took that photo of it, I thought, well, maybe I ought to get something that's less violent, that emphasizes more camaraderie. And I'd already seen Walter Mitty's and their sign, and I thought to myself, well, the violence offends these guys. They don't need to be playing rugby. So I talked to the guy. The article appeared on a Tuesday, and they ran the picture. It was a headline, local rugby players start a rugby team, and he was quintessentially authentic of everything I told him. Because of my subsequent career, I've been interviewed for the newspaper dozens, maybe scores of times. And never did any of those sons of bitches ever get it right, except for that first kid, that student editor of the student newspaper. And he got it completely right. And then he said, the guys are having, we talked about starting a rugby club and what rugby's all about. He said, the guys are having an organizational meeting tomorrow night. Call John or Tim, and he left our phone numbers for more information. John was already a brainiac. He was a smart guy, and he was already in an honor society of some sort. And they had a meeting that night, so it was me left at my home to answer the phone. I got 30 phone calls that night. The very first phone call was from a guy sitting right over here named Mark McCullough and his roommate KB Gary chirping in the background. The very first phone call. I cannot tell you how cool I think it is that 50 years after that very first phone call, those 2 sons of bitches are in this room with us tonight. The phone calls were guy after guy who hadn't played rugby until I got about the 6th phone call. This guy named Gordon Taylor. Yeah, I played rugby. Yeah, you sit here tonight. I played rugby in Arizona. And I'm 6'6", 230. And I was He was as he's advertised. He's 6'6", he's 230, he played rugby, he was a great guy, and he's here tonight after 50 years. The next night was a Wednesday, and we had an organizational meeting. John, using his connections in law school, had gotten us a classroom, like 40 guys showed up. We preached to them, we told them what we intended to do. We intended to start a club that was for the players and by the players, and that it was intended to make rugby for the players. It wasn't going to be like sports you may have played in America before, where you could go to practice all week and not get in the game on the weekend. Everybody was going to get to play, and if you didn't get to play in the A-side game, we're going to make a B-side game. If you get to play in that, we're going to have a C-side game. Every son of a bitch was going to get all the rugby they wanted. Well, the guys liked what we were preaching, and they elected John the first captain and me the first president. So the next night was Thursday. We knew that the Fort Sill rugby tournament started that Saturday, so John and I were trying to quickly force feed and make a rugby club, because, you know, when you have a rugby tournament 75 miles away, that's the best way to get your guys rugby. So it was that Thursday night practice, and we had 30 guys about there, and we showed them some scrum downs, we showed them some line outs, we showed them some back stuff, and that's where we picked up Larry Navy. And from that night, every night, up into and including this night, he has been an OU Rugby man. Larry Navy is the greatest pure winner I have ever seen. I suppose it's fair to say that I have competed in probably 3 great arenas in my life: the sports field, the battlefield, and the courtroom. All 3 are different for obvious and stark reasons, but all 3 have a similarity to them. The formula for winning is similar in all of them. Basically, it has to do with brilliance in the basics and then some other ingredients spiced in. Larry Navy knows the ingredient for victory. When Larry Navy was named Executive Athletic Director, I was confident. I knew that the OU Athletic Department was not going to lose many more games after that, because Larry Navy wouldn't let it happen. I'll say it this way. If I was tasked with the duty of fighting Russia, me, by myself, against fucking Russia, I would go get Larry Navy, and we would win. Within a couple of weeks, we picked up Gary Tresmer, the first of the 4 Tresmer brothers that played here together and transformed our game. And I mean no disrespect to anybody in this room, and I mean no disrespect to any of my mates that are no longer here or aren't here. I mean no disrespect to any of my foes, but Gary Tresmer is the best rugby player I ever saw with my own 2 eyes. He could run, pass, tackle, kick. A couple years after that, when Muckabout showed up and showed him how to dummy, he was practically somebody that should be made illegal. Later on, in the next fall, another person joined our merry little band, Nancy Leah Ott. Miss Ott was a 19-year-old sophomore. Her father was the commanding general of Fort Sill. Her uncle was a general. Her grandfather was the former inspector general of the Army. And Leah Ott, like me, and like a lot of you people in this room, had seen rugby, and she knew she had to do it. So she asked John and I, she said, well, you know, can I play in the men's team? John and I were all over it. So that following fall, in a B-side game, on our pitch, Nancy Leah Ott became the first woman in the history of the state of Oklahoma to play rugby. Leah got banged up in that game. Leah was a very, and probably still is, a very hard person. Her body was like iron. You could strike matches on it. She subsequently played women's professional football as a linebacker and won the national championship. But Leah Ott was 5'7" and 135 pounds, and her opposite was 210 pounds. So Leah got pushed around pretty good. Leah went back that night and got her crayon out and started studying her physics books. And she figured it wasn't going to work out for her. So Leah had an idea. Start a women's team. She came to John and asked us, let's start a women's team. We were all over that too. Now I cannot impress upon you what a courageous act that was back in 1975 for a woman, 20 years old. I mean, I was a grown man. I'd been to war. I'd graduated from college, and I was recruiting men. She was recruiting women. Never done before. I had told Leah a story about when I was an undergraduate. I'd been a door-to-door salesman one summer to raise money. I sold Bibles and religious material. Okay, it's against type, I know. And I had told her a technique that they had taught us. It's called the closed door technique. And it operates on the principle that, there's people that don't have any sales resistance. There's people that you can show up to their house and you can say, I'm here selling ass whoopings, and they'll say, I've been looking for one. So every time you gotta know, every time someone shut a door on you, every time the door didn't open, it wasn't a negative thing. No. It was a positive thing, because that meant it was more likely that next door was going to be opened by the person that says, I'm looking for a good ass whooping. So Leah went to every door, every woman's door at the University of Oklahoma, and knocked on it. They weren't there. She left a flyer underneath. She took John and I sometimes. She'd go by herself sometimes. When she developed allocates, she'd take them with her sometimes. But she knocked on every single door. The determined little Leah Ott to make rugby happen. And it did work. She recruited a team, 22, 25 women. They won their first game. They won their first tournament. It was quite remarkable. Tell you a quick story about her door-to-door adventures. There was a little morsel in her dorm room, reading the poems of Emily Bronte while doing differential equations with her left hand, dreaming about her little puppy back home. And Leah came knocking on the door with John and I. We walked in. We'll call this girl Michelle. We walked in, and Leah started preaching the gospel of rugby, and sure enough, that woman turned out to be Mikey Kincaid. And Mikey came and played center, and just as an aside, Mikey was the best sure tackler I've ever seen. You know how when you tackle people, you try to get your shoulders square, that's the key, you get under them and drive them? She did it every single time. Every single time the opponent went backwards. She also managed to marry her opposite on the men's side, Gary Tresburn. They've been married over 50 years. They're here tonight. It's evident that sadly the women's side has faded sometimes. But there's always been brave women like Michelle Core and Holly Eicher and Tracy Curtis to bring them back together. In fact, let's do it this way. If you've played women's rugby at the University of Oklahoma, please stand up. If you're a man that's helped and coached the Carl Stumps of the world, the Gordon D. Williams of the world, the Larry Napies of the world, stand up. you too will have ideas. And if you never learn anything from the origin story of your rugby club, learn this. If you have an idea, and you're willing to put some work and energy to it, you may have to go door to door. And if you get very lucky, you may change the world just a little bit. You may make the world a better place just a little bit. But as we can see, a little bit is a lot. You know, you meet as strangers at practice, their earnest faces and their goofy fucking socks. And gradually you come to care for them. You go to their weddings, you hold their children's, you celebrate their triumphs, you mourn their tragedies, and in the end, you give their eulogy. I've thought long and hard about this love between us and what brings us together. Certainly it's the shared suffering. I mean, the pitch is cold and wet for all of us. The sprints burn all of our lungs. When Muscles McGurk wants to knock someone down, Muscles McGurk knocks someone down. And gradually you began to realize that your teammates are brave people. You know, the only virtue that can't be faked is courage. And it unmistakably takes courage to play rugby. Not only the acute courage to play the game, which sometimes is like a rolling bar fight, but a different kind of courage to alter your life, to come to practice on Tuesday and Thursday, to go on the road on the weekends, to do the squats, to do the sprints, to be a good teammate, to go to work Monday morning with black eyes. And gradually you come to realize that your teammates are brave people for what they do. And you may reach a point like I did. I reached the point where I said, I don't know if I'm a brave person or not, but my friends sure are. You know, the writer Joseph Campbell said that we are all our own heroes on our own mythic journey. And he's got that right. And rugby lends itself to the metaphor of a journey. And be the hero on your journey. Step forward, wade into it. And when you reach the point where, like the old saying goes, everybody wants to be a hero till it's time to do hero shit, do the hero shit. New Zealand Maori have a saying, kia kaha, kia toa, aki, aki. It means be strong, be brave, forever, forever. I'll see you in the rugs. Thank you very much.